Welcome, everyone. Good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on the time zone you're joining. We're excited to have you here. And I'm pleased to have with me our awesome partner, Layla. Layla, as many of you probably know her very well from all of her videos online. Layla has been putting out awesome content on a weekly or bi-weekly basis for the last probably 6 months. And we really enjoy those videos and share them all the time with you guys. And so you're probably familiar with Layla. You probably, if you don't already, you definitely want to subscribe to her channel and get notified every new video that comes out. But today we are very excited to have Layla over here on a live webinar with all of us to share with us how to go about documenting SOPs and business processes within SmartSuite. And she'll be here for a live Q&A. So please chime in with your questions. If you have any questions you want us to take live, drop them in the Q&A section, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen. And then you can obviously continue using the chat, which looks like many of you are already using it, to chime in and chat with each other. But just remember to put things in the Q&A if you want us to actually address them live, and we're going to do our best to take questions live and get to all the questions. And so without further ado, I'd hand it over to Layla to introduce herself and give us a little more background about herself and ProcessDriven, and then dive right in. So the floor is yours, Layla. We're excited to see what you got.
Awesome. Thanks for that introduction, Avi. I'm going to just dive right in with a bit of a disclaimer that this is not a YouTube video yet. So for all of you folks who have taken some time out of your day to participate with us live and join SmartSuite for this webinar, use that Q&A that Avi was mentioning. Do not be shy. It's not going to interrupt us or anything. I would love us to spend a lot of time on questions. If I don't know the answer, we've got Avi here. We've got Peter here. There's so many smart people in the proximity that I would love to make sure that by the end of this webinar, everybody walks away with greater clarity as to how they can start writing down what they do inside of SmartSuite. So with that, I'm going to share my screen real quick and go through a little walkthrough of how to start building out a hub for all your documentation inside of SmartSuite. Just a quick thumbs up. Avi, are you able to see my screen here? Just make sure that's working.
Yep.
Fabulous. Okay. Always double checking before I go on a 20-minute rampage. So here we are inside of SmartSuite. If you guys are in that exploring or first look category where you just are getting started, your account might look a little blank. But to follow along with us today, all you need to do is either start off with a blank solution, which I'm a bit of a start from scratch kind of person, or grab one of the many templates that touch on this documentation topic. Everything I'm about to show you is something you could easily create from scratch in about 10 to 20 minutes. If you're a little bit new to the tool, maybe 20 to 30 minutes, but this is all going to be very lightweight and manageable. Okay, so here we are inside a solution in SmartSuite that I'm just calling ProcessDriven for now. And this is where I'm going to start tracking my documentation for my business. Now, there is a lot of different stuff going on across the top of this page. There are a lot of apps in SmartSuite. Each of these apps represent a different kind of database, a collection of information that we're tracking. And each one of these has a different purpose when it comes to helping us strengthen our business processes. But before I go into each of these, I want to spend a quick second just explaining how this relates to SOPs and documentation. What the heck does reference links have to do with business processes? You see, all of our businesses, whether they're side hustles or large teams or somewhere in between, we have things that we need to do. And that's what this whole process and system stuff is. We use those words a lot, but very rarely do we define them. So let's just break them down for a second. What you do is your process. The things that you need to do regularly and how you accomplish them is your way of working, your process, your step-by-step journey. And what you do is generally something you already know. It's in your head because you've done it once or twice before. They're called your habits, and you just figure them out over time. But when we're trying to make our work a little easier, rely less on our memory, or to have other people help us, it can become really helpful to get how we do what we do written down as well. Our processes and the systems those tie into are the what. We need to figure those out, but for many of us, we figure those out in the early days. SOPs and documentation, all of this stuff to the right, is the how. These are those different ingredients, those playbooks. Think of them almost like IKEA instructions to build the furniture. They tell us how to bring those processes to life. In this example, how do I outline and record YouTube content? The way we do those processes is what's defined in our documentation. With us so far? Let me know in the chat if you are on the same page. Just write yes in that chat. Now, once we have this kind of basic understanding of our what's and our how's, we can build things out inside of our SmartSuite account. So heading over here, we have the main database that many of us will want to have set up in our account, which is an SOPs app. All this is something you can create from scratch by adding a few fields into a new app that you'll call SOPs. I'm going to open this up just to show you an example. The very top of our SOPs area is a field that is the title field, and we just call it SOP. It's the name of the standard operating procedure. What the heck does that mean? It just means the recipe, the instructions list, those IKEA pamphlets that you can barely follow. That's what our SOPs are. Below the SOP field, which is a record title, we've got a status to help us know the condition of that given SOP. We have an owner for a given SOP, and we actually have written out this information. Now, I have a bit of a complicated structure here, but it's still quite digestible. And this is what we'd want to be having inside of all of our SOPs when we want to start building out that documentation hub inside of SmartSuite. Basically, what we have here is a Smart Doc field. My favorite field in all of SmartSuite is a Smart Doc that allows us to have tons of formatting and pretty colors and eye-catching graphics that allow us to define what exactly our overall approach is to doing this thing. Here you can see I'm using the default value field in SmartSuite to have this really easily set up every time I create a new SOP. Of the folks in the chat, I'm not sure all of us have used default fields yet, so I'm just going to briefly explain what this is. Whenever you create a field, most of them will have this little tab here in the modify field settings. When we scroll down, this field allows us to have kind of default values loaded up every time that field is created. So the next time I create an SOP, I don't need to type all of this crazy stuff in. It just comes in with this structure ready to go. The first step of building out an SOP database is actually creating out this app in SmartSuite. You can do that, like I talked about, from scratch just by writing SOP. The second step of creating your SOP database would be to create a record and add the relevant fields. The fields you want to add are going to be to match what on the screen in just a moment when my computer behaves. There we are. You want to add these 4 fields in. This is the status field, a lookup field, which I'll explain in a moment, and the Smart Doc field. That's step 2. Step 3 of getting your SOPs into SmartSuite is going to be setting those default values because we are lazy. I am lazy at least, and I don't want to be doing more typing than I need to. And I want all of my instructions to be consistent. So no matter which instruction I'm looking at, I know where to find what I need. If we'd like to, in the kind of discussion Q&A portion of today, we can talk through these different sections and why these sections each matter, why they're formatted the way they are. But for now, let's just leave it to say that this documentation area is where that instruction stuff lives. Good so far? Hope so. If I scroll down a little bit further, we have one final piece in this puzzle, our final field. Each of these that would only take a few seconds to add in. This final field is a linked record field. If Smart Docs are my favorite field in SmartSuite, linked records is a very close second. Linked records are where we can connect information in SmartSuite together. And unlike some of the other tools out there that we've maybe talked about earlier on, we have the ability to have these linked records be used in so many different ways, including lookups. So let me just break this down briefly in case folks are here and they have no idea what this whole linked record thing is. Essentially what I've done, and I'll create one from scratch just so you can follow along since this is the trickiest part of the setup, is I've added a new field by clicking down here, clicking linked record, and I've connected this SOPs area with my processes. So I'm making that connection to say, hey, this instruction is for this process. I'm doing that right here with the linked app choice. I have the option here to choose some settings. I don't want to require it, but I would like to make sure I can link to multiple things. And if I wanted to, I can adjust how this visually looks using advanced settings. At this point in time, I'm actually very happy with the default values, so I'm not going to go ahead and add any new fields, although I have this choice if I prefer to see things like when it was last updated in this overview area. I'm going to click Save and add this field. Now, when I add this linked record, all of a sudden I've told SmartSuite, hey, these two things are buddies. These things are connected through this pathway that is the linking that I just did. My computer is a little slow because I'm chatting with all of you and running a camera and so on. So when this loads, what we'll see is a field that looks very similar to the one above pop into my account. When that happens, we'll be able to then basically have SmartSuite figure stuff out for us based on that connection. We can tell SmartSuite, hey, for everything that is connected through this linked record, will you please tell me how many connections there are? Will you tell me what condition those connections are in? Could you tell me who is in charge of those connections? And if we go back in here, we can actually see this in the one that's already existent, such as processes right here. You can see that this connection exists. That kind of asking SmartSuite to tell us stuff based on that connection is what is happening right here with the lookup field I told you I'd explain earlier on. If I go inside here, you can see that this is looking up the value based on that connection. This is us telling SmartSuite, hey, look at all the processes that this is connected to and tell me who the process owner or owners are for these processes. I could change this and I could have it tell me the condition of that process. I could have it tell me the last updated date. All sorts of different things I can choose to change out here. But that is all possible thanks to us being able to network together, connect these fields and the values in two totally separate places. So if I go over here, you'll see that the process we were looking up, this one right here, I was able to preview this field without even having to click over. So I've connected my processes to my SOPs, and I'm able to report on different data on either side of that relationship. Beyond SOPs, if we start thinking about SmartSuite as much more than a spreadsheet, much more than a database, a hybrid of both, we can also start to create apps for other types of equipment that can support our process. So for example, I've already showed you SOPs, instructions, right? Recipes. But that's not the only thing that can help us accomplish our processes, right? Let's just say we need to create YouTube content. That's such a creative task. We need lists of ideas. We need writing guidelines. We need our values. We need our brand guide. We need so many different pieces that may go beyond an instructions list. And that's the skill and knowledge component that may not be captured in a simple SOP. And that's where additional databases can help us. The beautiful thing about SmartSuite, particularly in the way that access is structured right now, is whether you're on the most basic plan or one of the most advanced plans, you have access to so many features just from day one. And one of the things that you are able to do with those features is build out many different databases for different types of information and use all of the powerful features without having to be nickel and dimed on each plan like we've seen in other spaces. So if I head over to roles, for example, I could choose to document what people are responsible for each process. This connection I can do just like I connected SOPs to processes. Okay, so here we have this role right here of coach. I can connect it to what processes that coach is going to do. Let's just say for some reason they're setting files over. And all of a sudden I've made this additional piece of context. Now I know not only what I need to do and how to do it, I know who is going to do it. Those are three pieces of information I no longer need to store in my head. I no longer need to keep me up at night. I no longer need to be stressing about when I'm on vacation. I can network these pieces together. Similarly, we have things like reference files, maybe our brand guide, maybe our tone of writing. We can have these things well defined and connect them to our processes as a resource for how to execute things in the way that we want to do it, and ensure that we are performing our activities in a way that's aligned with what we need to accomplish and consistent every single time, regardless of which person is doing the action. The thing I like about this overall setup, as I was talking to Avi before we quite got started here, is the fact that we can have all of these pieces, documentation of our automations, of who's doing what, of what actions we need to do and how we need to do them, all inside of one central spot. So that way, if you are someone like I think I saw in the chat that we have a lot of folks who are looking to do task management in SmartSuite using their task features, by having your SOPs and your processes all inside of SmartSuite, when it comes time to manage your tasks, you can connect them all together. And as I've talked about already, those linked records are so powerful. So let's just imagine we have a task over here called send files to editor. I'd like to assign this to my assistant, who is going to be in charge of sending files to my editor. Wouldn't it be amazing if in my task management area, I could assign this to that other person? And inside that very same task, I could ensure that I have connections, linked records or mentions or something else that tells this person, hey, when you need to send the files to the editor, here's our process. Here's the instructions. Here's the reference files you need. And it's all right there connected in one search bar, in one tool, in one place I know I can find all of the things I need. So I don't have to spend 20 minutes training my new assistant on how exactly we send files to the editor. And my new assistant doesn't have to spend hours just guessing. So that's the overall approach to creating your documentation inside of SmartSuite. You create applications for each category of work you want to organize. These are just created up here by creating a new app. You add in the fields for the types of details you want to track, which, like I had said at the beginning, I like to create from scratch because I'm particular and I like to have certain fields how I like them. But you can also create using any of the SmartSuite templates that are available. Once you have this in place, you can make connections between different things in SmartSuite. And ultimately, by having it all together, you have an external brain for your business's how, let alone who and why and so on. So that way you don't have to have your brain running your entire business and your memory isn't the limiting factor. If your memory is as bad as mine, trust me, you don't want that memory of a human memory running your business. One little thing I'm just going to touch briefly on here is that once you have all of this magic, you can, of course, report on it. Now, I haven't gone too crazy on this side of things, but I want to show something very simple that I think anyone, again, in that 10 to 20 minute time scale could create inside this solution should you want to recreate it after this webinar. This is just a simple dashboard. I made an app that is blank. All it has in it is dashboards simply because I like how it looks. There's no functional reason to do this. But in this area, I've created some widgets to report on the data that is in this entire solution. So on my systems, on my processes, I can report on the condition field. This is set up going inside of settings, and I'm showing you this in case you want to steal it, by the way, feel free, where I'm reporting on the systems app, and I want to count the strength, the overall status of those systems. I want to report on them, both right now, and maybe if I want to change my widget type over time, I want to see, hey, is my onboarding system working well or not? I don't want to be guessing. I want to be able to see it. And that's the kind of stuff you can do when you actually have these categories written down instead of just having them in your head. We can see our process connections here, our SOPs. Data's not that interesting with just a few pieces in here, but we can see different fields based on what we have selected in the widgets in SmartSuite. For anyone who is new to SmartSuite and haven't yet played around with this widget library, my friend, just do it. You may lose a little bit of time because it's just really fun to click around, but we've got some nice demos on the YouTube channel. And I know Emma and the team, Nate, the team at SmartSuite have created a ton of content around how to use each of these widgets and each of this functionality. But these widgets can be a great way to report and gamify this whole SOPs and documentation bit. So I see we have some questions coming in. Would it be all right if we switch over to that realm?
Yeah, absolutely. Let me throw you a few questions we're getting here. And folks, if you put your question in the chat, you might want to move it to the Q&A so it's easy for us to get to everything. The first question coming in from Alicia, I'm just going to go in the order of the questions that were received. So Alicia is asking, can this SOP app be saved as a template?
Absolutely can be in a few unique ways. So I know template functionality in SmartSuite is evolving super fast. So as Avi, you can probably chime in that how whatever I'm going to say right now is probably going to be outdated in a few months because y'all keep changing things very quickly as the new things are developed. But how I like to do is to have my apps in a placeholder solution that is used as a template area. And then I like to duplicate. If I do need to create, for example, a new version of this app, I'll duplicate this app and then move it to another solution. However, in this setup, there's no need to do that because you're going to have one consistent app that you will just use for all SOPs. But Avi, I don't know if you want to share. I know there's a lot of change happening in this. I'm excited, but I don't think it's quite hit me yet.
Yeah, no, we're very seriously looking into the template functionality, being able to templatize records or apps and pull them in as a template. We did set up the option of setting up checklists as templates in automations. And so you can templatize things via automations. You can also obviously templatize content with the default on most of the field types, but we still understand the need for templatizing a full record with all the field types at once and having multiple different templates like that, or templatizing a solution or an app. And so we're looking into that. We don't have firm timelines yet based on more pressing priorities, but that's something that we'll probably eventually get to, I would say.
Yeah. And the nice thing is you can still do it now. It's just, it might not say the word template real big, but it functions very similarly. So
exactly, which is why we're not prioritizing it for tomorrow, but it's on the roadmap, I'd say.
Awesome.
Yep.
I think they were asking about this particular template, if they'll have access to this template.
Yeah, no, that's the next question I'm about to share. So someone is asking, will this SmartSuite template be shared out? Is this a template people can download publicly?
So it is not at this point. We've got little pieces of it available across the world here, but I think I'll take that as an idea for our team here to consider building out. However, like I said at the beginning, even if we don't yet have this one-click install, we do for our members and our clients, you can create this. SmartSuite is almost too easy to start playing in. So recreating this from what I've shown you here, I would absolutely recommend, but we don't yet have a one-click install for the general public. We do that for our clients at this stage.
There you go. Feel free to join Layla's clientele to get a one-click install. That functionality is available in SmartSuite, but whenever a consultant creates their own templates, they obviously own those templates. And that's property that is for sale, it sounds like, if you reach out to Layla. Okay, Pat is asking, for tasks, how do we set up recurring tasks? Is there a way to achieve recurring tasks? I'll share quickly what's on the roadmap because this is exciting. The team is pretty close to releasing this. This is something that they've been working on for the past few months, actually, and we're pretty close. So I'd say it'll probably go into testing within the next 2 to 3 weeks. And so you can expect to see it, I'd say, within 4 to 6 weeks. We're calling it repeating tasks, not recurring tasks. That's just SmartSuite terminology, repeating tasks. But yes, that is going to be available. It will be available within the record. From like the record menu dropdown, you'll be able to set a recurring task. But Layla, feel free to share. There's obviously ways to do it with automations and so on right now. So if you want to dive into that, or we can move to the next question.
Yeah, I guess I'll briefly say we get this question a lot too. And I keep putting off making a video because I've seen what you guys have been working on behind the scenes with the recurrences. And I'm just like, oh, give me those repeating tasks. There's no point playing around with workarounds because it is so close and it seems like it's going to work so well. But for folks who they have a burning need for reoccurring things right now, when a record matches a condition, I think is a nice way to go about it, where you can say, hey, when the due date arrives, or when the status changes, or when a field is updated to meet certain criteria, whichever trigger is relevant for your situation, you can then have the field be updated so the due date can change and certain things can reset. That's the go-to workaround I've used so far. But as I've said, I'm very excited for the repeating tasks, repeating records and to-dos feature coming out in SmartSuite. I personally wouldn't spend hours and hours automating this right now. I think you guys are so close that I'd probably hold off for a week and just look toward that new release.
Okay, sounds good. There's a whole bunch of more questions. I'm happy to keep running through them, but pause me at any point if you want to continue sharing your screen. I don't mean to cut you off over here.
No, I love it.
Okay, excellent. This is a loaded question. Feel free to tackle it as long or as short as you'd like. But Cole is asking, I recall Layla previously created this type of SOP database with linked records and ClickUp. Can you explain the differences between doing this in ClickUp versus SmartSuite?
Yeah, candidly, I've created the same kind of approach in a lot of different tools now because I really believe, and I love that SmartSuite is willing to have this conversation, but as so many of you have probably heard me and others say, It's about your system and not necessarily the features at the end of the day. If you have the right architecture, you can really translate it into the tool that best suits your workflows. I don't think you need to choose a tool just based on the marketing message or what someone in a Facebook group says. You should find the tool that works really well for you, and you can build out these kinds of SOP databases in that tool. In this case, we've talked about how many times on the channel, but SmartSuite works so well for folks who need that hybrid between tasks and data, and you need to bring it all together. So if that is what you need, you definitely need to be using SmartSuite. And if you're using SmartSuite, your SOPs and your documentation should be right there alongside where you're doing your work. So to go back to the actual question of what's the difference between doing this in ClickUp and SmartSuite, it's the tool you're using and some functionality differences. For example, here in SmartSuite, we're able to have linked records and relational data that we can group by. That's a little thing that makes our life a lot easier, where we can link by related data to have better reporting. We can report on related data. We can calculate on related data. By using SmartSuite, we have some expanded functionality that we did not have when we used a more project and task-centric tool, which is where ClickUp's at. It is far more on that side of the spectrum, which is why SmartSuite is in the middle of the road between tasks and data. It's a sweet spot. So those are the big functionality differences. But in terms of big picture, we're using a different platform that has different use cases and has different abilities, which opens up a whole new world depending on what type of information you need to structure. I think it's important to use the tool that's going to work for you. And let's make sure it's working for you and not you just using the tool because you feel held hostage to it or because you happen to already have it. Functions over features.
That's awesome. I'm going to follow up. I'm going to skip one question real quick and then come back to it just because we're on the same topic. So we have an anonymous attendee asking, how does creating and housing SOPs in SmartSuite compare to doing the same in Google Docs?
Yeah, I mean, I could even expand this to look at Google Docs or SOP focused software such as ProcessDriven, Trainual, so on. There are a lot of places where you can write and store information. And for most people, it is going to be easier and less friction-induced path to put your information directly inside the tool you're using every day. The main reason I like to put information right in here is because of search and automations. It's great to be able to search SmartSuite for the word, this Latin gibberish, and be able to find that term. I might not know the name of the SOP, but to be able to search all of SmartSuite and find content that matches my search criteria, that is a huge bonus to having information directly in SmartSuite or whatever tool you're using, as opposed to having it in another place. If I didn't have any of this information in SmartSuite, it was totally blank, and I just had a link to google.com/blah, blah, 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 here's my Google Doc link, all of a sudden I've lost all that searchability. I can no longer search by the contents of the SOP or the wiki or whatever. I can only search by the title. And I don't know about you, but I don't always remember the title I put on a file. And that's why I like to keep more things in-house as opposed to dedicated tools or outside tools. I think under one roof works really well for most people. And if I can add a little bonus plug here, permissioning also makes this very easy in SmartSuite. So the ability to limit those field permissions. So maybe I don't want my marketing team to be able to edit SOPs for the customer service team. By having these extra permissions here, I can do this safely while protecting searchability.
Okay, thank you for that. I'm going to go back. So we have a question here for TC Optimize. Would you set up your task management app like you've set up in the lists and ClickUp with views instead of apps?
Yeah, so no. It's kind of like if you're learning a new language. When you're learning a new language, do you just translate every single word and article into that new language? No, because you're going to sound like a 2-year-old and people aren't going to understand your broken French. Instead, you want to focus on the intent of the sentence you're trying to say and say it in the language you're trying to use. So in this case, there is not a one-to-one translation from ClickUp to SmartSuite. They're fairly different tools. There are some similarities between apps and lists, but it's not one for one. However, thanks working with SmartSuite, we actually produced a video that I think is either out or it's about to come out talking about that translation and going through some of the nuance you need to be aware of. That's where I would point you if you are in this transition of trying to get from ClickUp to SmartSuite and you want to figure out, what do my folders become? What do my lists become? That video goes through some of the considerations. And Avi, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe there's also a wizard coming at some point soon to help with that migration as well.
Yep. We're working on a import widget from ClickUp and Airtable, and we have Google Sheets and Excel is already completed by the simple function of copy paste right into your grid. So this is a recent improvement we rolled out where you can highlight data that's either in an Excel, Google Sheets, or even another SmartSuite app and just paste it right into a SmartSuite app, and it will automatically create the necessary fields and paste the data in there. This works for multiple columns and rows.
I love that. And we'll see as that wizard comes out. I'm sure we'll be talking about it on our channel and so on. But I think as a general rule, it's going to be really cool to see what that looks like, because a lot of times you need many lists in ClickUp to do what you can do in one app in SmartSuite, just because the features are so different. So it'll be cool to see what that looks like.
Okay. And I see a quick follow-up question. So will ClickUp be able to integrate with SmartSuite? The moment we're not working on a integration, as you probably think of it in terms of an integration where it's a bi-directional integration. We're simply working on a function where you can quickly import your ClickUp information to convert into SmartSuite. If you're looking to migrate, essentially making that migration easily, but we're always open to use cases. And if the need arises for a bi-directional sync or integration with ClickUp, we're definitely open to looking at it. Laura is asking the next question over here. Template checklists, can we see that? Maybe we can get a sneak peek of checklists within automations if you have that handy. Otherwise, we can circle back.
Yeah, let me just create a quick checklist field over here, checklist. So the first automation, which I know people don't consider this one, but those default values I think are pretty handy. So that's the first one I would put in here. But if we have a checklist and we've got those 2 default values that'll show up for all new records, as soon as we have this field, I'll head into actual automations. And based on our trigger, we're just going to pick something random, such as when it's created. Doesn't really matter what our trigger is. We can update that record to add in details into that checklist field. So here we can say every time it's created, you can add task 3, task 4, and so on. Based on a due date, that I love how this is dynamic. That's really powerful. And we can even set our assignees from this. But in terms of templating it, I believe that's to come, right? Of being able to take this all in one chunk, unless I'm missing it.
No, I guess people view this as templatized. So essentially it's automations that are these are checklist templates that are being triggered by an automation. They don't live in a template center, they live in the automation. And then obviously, like I said before, we're going to be working on being able to templatize a full record, right? And having options and so on. But this, as you referenced, this essentially allows you to dynamically pull in different templates. So essentially, sometimes you might want to have one type of checklist as the next step, and the other time you want to have another checklist as the next step. This allows you to set up an automation with a specific trigger that will pull in task 3 and 4, and then an automation that will pull in task 5 and 6 if a different condition is met and that trigger is met. That's the idea behind this. And we're obviously going to, like I keep saying, we're going to work on that. And I think it's even some part of scoping for that has been done already. But you guys, we love it. You guys ask for so much that we have to pick and choose, which is a good problem to have. Keep those product feedback coming. We love it at SmartSuite.
This is a great workaround, though, especially for folks with CRMs or with pipelines where there's different stages that trigger different actions. It can definitely get the job done.
Okay, excellent. We're going to, I guess, let me know. I'm going to continue shooting with questions, and just pause me if you want to share anything else.
Sure.
But we have a question coming in from Danny, and just a quick reminder, if you want us to bring up a question live, please put it in the Q&A section as opposed to the chat section. There are 2 different sections, but the Q&A allows us the functionality to actually answer them live and mark them as answered. Please drop your questions in the Q&A if you'd like us to get to them live. Danny is asking, take us through day-to-day stuff to check what is due today, tomorrow, what to focus on, etc.
Yeah. So right now in this overall setup, Besides the task management area, none of these things are typically going to have our assignment, our project management fields like assign to or due date. So just in these areas, I really am not going to have much on the day to day unless I choose to add those fields in. However, let's say I do have some tasks in here. I do have assignments and checklists and all that fancy stuff we talked about. In that case, I'm probably going to be starting my day up here in my work. And this is where, and don't judge me, guys, this is a demo account. I don't actually have 81 overdues, but this is where I can go to see what I've got on my plate. This will show me checklist items, overall records, anything attached to those assignment and status project management features will show up in here. And this is individualized to me and can be viewed at different layouts depending on how I like to see things. So I can go through and see all that fun stuff, but I prefer to see things by due date, which would, Danny, this exactly solves your use case. This My Work section is available out of the box, no setup needed, and every user will have their own kind of customized My Work report, for lack of a better word, up at the top right.
Okay, hopefully that answers your question, Danny. We have an anonymous attendee asking, can SmartSuite also work for one person trying to manage projects and tasks only in a group setup?
Yeah, so yes, I think I can pretty unreservedly say yes, absolutely. I think where you want to kind of pivot things a little bit if you're a one-person show is maybe keep things a bit simpler. You don't want to spend so much time clicking around by having quite as much complexity as a team of 100 would need. But absolutely. Actually, over this past weekend, I was creating a SmartSuite solution area for myself for a hobby thing I'm starting. And I was just building it out for one person, and your approach, the features you use, it's very similar. It's just a little bit easier, faster to set up because you don't need to worry as much about permissions and assignments in the same way you would if it was a group setup. Although I do think for large teams, SmartSuite can very easily scale up.
Sounds good. Monica is asking, can we see what fields you have for the systems app?
Sure thing. So this is a pretty simple mockup, but here's our systems app. Our first field is a record title where we just give ourselves a name for what exactly this system is. By the way, folks, our systems are just referring to these larger ecosystems of responsibility that are made up of many processes and technologies and other things all working together. Think of it like a big category. We've got a status field that shows us some different conditions once again. And then we have lots of linked records, such as our system owner, the role that's responsible for this system, the link to the score, kind of what we've got going on there, text for what the actual job, the kind of category above is. This is a little nuanced. We won't worry about that too much. And then again, a description field, a smart doc that's breaking down what the system is and why it matters. If you wanted to, and in some cases, we'll have additional details here, such as connecting it to processes, having a formula reporting on how many SOPs are connected to those processes. And we can even add things like attachment diagrams where we might have a process map, a system overview, visuals. That's what we'll typically see in more sophisticated setups.
Okay. Chris is asking, do you utilize sub-items in your processes, SOPs, or anywhere else in this workflow? Just curious to see it in action.
Yeah, I actually anticipated this question, Chris. I'm glad you got the telepathy through the stream here. I currently am not. And the reason I'm not is because I'm a snob for linked records. I'm obsessed with them. I love them in every single form that they can be. And when we use sub-items, we tuck these records inside records in their little cocoon, and they're not as reportable or calculatable. And because I'm a snob for those linked records and I just love using them, I've chosen not to tuck things into sub-items. Where I would be using sub-items if I expanded this template out would probably be inside these areas, where maybe I would have a sub-item for categories of reference links. But for more on sub-items, we actually talked about it in this video. I actually had it ready because I figured someone would ask this video about 5 different ways to connect SOPs and tasks in SmartSuite. If you go into this and go to about the 20-minute mark, I go into sub-items as one of the options and when it's a great choice. I'm just particular in this use case that I've chosen not to, but they can be great for a lot of applications.
Okay.
Oh, perfect. Oh, Peter's messing up my whole thing. Now I got to go back in. Perfect.
Yep, I was just going to call out from Peter. Peter, our CTO, is calling out. We are enhancing sub-items so that they behave more like linked records, coming soon. So you'll have to update us on your preferences once we make that update on where do you find yourself using sub items versus linked records.
Love it.
But okay, great question, Chris. Benjamin is asking our next question. How do you get an overview of all SOPs so you can see a company-wide relationship diagram? I'm a visual learner.
Yeah. So one option would be the data schema view thing that I'm going to try to butcher the understanding really of. I don't have one ready to go to show you, but I remember when that first came out from SmartSuite, I was like, jaw drop, this changes everything. It basically shows you in a visual chart the breakdown of, perfect, thank you. It shows you a breakdown of how the different related data all connects together in that data schema kind of setup. I know there's been a webinar recently on that, I want to say, or maybe not so recently, that talks about that in greater detail. That would be one way. And the second way, Benjamin, like when I first created this, I would literally go to the whiteboard or a virtual whiteboard and just map out the connections I wanted to have, because I think that's a nice way to explain it to myself and also to others. Like with clients, I'll usually show a kind of a chart of how they all connect together.
Yep. And just for everyone to understand, so that the data schema is a widget within dashboards so that you know where to find that, and feel free to test it. You can control it to the current solution that you're in and just see what gets linked out to other solutions, or you can see your entire workspace, and then you can drag and drop things and reorder them and so on. And then once you add the widget, you can just resize it. You can make it its own dashboard, or you can just put it as a widget along the rest of your dashboards. But that is the idea of widgets. Yeah, we're gonna move on to the next question. Hopefully that answers your question, Benjamin. Andrean is asking, how do you add all the cute emojis in SmartSuite? I want that.
By using the emoji keyboard, I'm the same way. I like the emojis, I think, especially for our team members who maybe are a little spreadsheet allergic. They break out in hives if they see too many grid views. The emojis help us make SmartSuite even friendlier. The way we do that on a Windows device is the Windows key and period. On Mac, I believe it's Command Shift period or Mac key shift period, something like that. You can look up emoji keyboard for your given device, and all you do is then just add that in while typing in any text field. You've probably noticed I use that in field titles, in help text, in app names. It's just because one solution icon is not nearly enough for me.
Yeah, so I guess emojis are basically like essentially typing on the keyboard. You have to just find a way to reach the shortcut, and then you can essentially add any emoji in the playbook. Okay, sounds good. It looks like we're reaching the bottom of the questions. Feel free. Oh, I see Larry says he can also paste in emojis. That is true. You can copy and paste emojis from anywhere on the web, and it's Control-Command-Space on Mac. Of course, it's a bunch more keys than Windows.
Always forget it. I like remember it, then I forget it again. So thank you, Chris and Rick.
That's awesome. Okay. And I see we have a bunch more sources for some interesting emojis. Larry is sharing uncode.org emoji chart. Interesting. Haven't seen that one yet. Okay, excellent. It looks like we reached the bottom of our questions. So this has been amazing. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me. And thanks, folks, for taking time out of your day to talk about the thrilling topic of process documentation. I love it.
Yeah. It looks like our next topic might be dashboards and reporting. That's what I think Laura is asking. Next webinar, reporting. I guess we'll have to work on that or something similar, but thank you very much for joining and sharing your SOPs and business processes in SmartSuite. Thank you everyone for joining us, and looking forward to seeing you all on the next one.
Thank you all.
Bye everyone.